excited for this event. This has been a long time in the making. As you all may know about me, my name is Joanna Pottle, of course, and I am the artistic director of this project. And this project is following my Fulbright grant to Poland, which also is following my graduation from James Madison University in Harrisonburg, Virginia. In addition, due to the pandemic situation, sadly, my grant is on pause. I will be doing an extension, hopefully, all fingers crossed, in the fall. But in the meantime, I'm really excited to be doing this grant project where I'm working with Polish artists and American artists, and we're using art as a way to archive this crazy year and this pandemic experience. And we're doing some cross-cultural exchange as we're doing right now. Sorry, I'm just letting in a couple more people. Wow, okay, this is great. So thank you all so much for being here. I know probably the last thing everyone wants to do right now is be online once again after doing everything virtually. So we appreciate you being here. Give me 1 second, I'm logging in some more people. So yes, good morning, good afternoon, and evening, everyone. So once again, my name is Joanna Pottle. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the artistic director of this project, and I'm so excited for you all to be here today. I'm going to go ahead and get started, and just to kind of give you a brief overview of what we're doing today, I will be introducing our artists, Dr. Michał Zawada and Elizabeth Claire Rose, who are gracious enough to join us today and share a little bit about their work and their practice. As you have probably heard, we are called the Solidarity Project or Solidarnos Project, and this is a US Embassy grant project. So first and foremost, I want to thank the US Embassy in Poland for this amazing opportunity to do this cross-cultural exchange, to work with artists from all over the world, to engage in dialogue, to make work that responds to the pandemic crisis, and to really unify through virtual means of accountability. Before we get started, does anyone have any questions or comments? If you have any technology issues, let us know. You can type anything in the chat, or once again, raise your virtual hand. If you're not sure where those icons are, please go to the bottom of the screen. You have the options to chat. There's the little chat icon. You can see all the participants. And there's the reactions. So if you click on that, you should have the raise hand function. You should be able to use an emoji, a heart. So we encourage you to interact with us despite the virtual context, of course, and to please let us know what you think and to ask questions and make comments. Give me 1 moment. I'm letting a couple more people in. Hello, everyone. So we'll get started in just a moment. I will be passing the virtual floor to Dr. Michał Zawada first. But before we get started, I just want to introduce our curatorial assistants. Jack Holloway is our US-based assistant here. He's waving his real hand here. And he's been helping me with logistics, and he's been a creative support, and he will be available for any technology concerns you may have, any questions or any issues that you need assistance with during the call. We also have Julia. Actually, she can't be with us today, but she is our Polish-based curatorial assistant. So please say a big hello for her, and she'll be able to view this later on, of course. We are, in fact, recording the event for people who couldn't be here with us today. So please note that as well. So a quick overview of today's meeting. We are going to be talking with Michał Zawada first, and then we'll have a quick 5-minute break after having a Q&A. I will be moderating that, so I will be asking some questions, but we would love to hear from you. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat, or once again, raise your virtual hand and speak aloud if you prefer. We'll have a quick 5-minute break, about an hour in, and then we'll speak with Elizabeth, who will give her artist talk. We'll have a Q&A with her, and then we will conclude the meeting. So once again, for those of you who are just joining us, you are here at the Solidarity virtual session at home or at dom, so at home in Polish. And we're doing a virtual artist series as part of our artistic exchange and cross-cultural dialogue to speak with artists during the pandemic. I know for me, anyway, it has been a challenge to maintain my studio practice, to connect with other artists. So we hope that this event and this series will be a way to serve as accountability and community during this difficult time. So in just a moment, I will be passing the virtual floor to Michał, but any questions or comments before we go ahead and get started? Nope. Okay. Well, once again, thank you again for coming. I'm going to introduce Michał briefly. As you probably know, he is based in Kraków in Poland, and he is, personally, I'm very biased, but he is one of my favorite people in Poland. He was my Fulbright mentor, one of my Fulbright mentors, and has been a godsend during my time here in Poland during the pandemic. One of my many amazing people here in Poland that has been just an amazing support and just an exceptionally kind human being. So first and foremost, but in addition, Michał is an incredible visual artist. He engages in painting, in video art, in photography, and he's also a lecturer at ASPA, which is the Jan Matejko Academy of Fine Arts in Kraków. He actually has a background in art history. He studied at the Jagiellonian University, also my current university. And he studied art history before he went to the painting faculty at the Fine Arts Academy in Kraków from about 2005 to 2010. After that, he pursued a doctoral program in Poland and in Europe. If you don't know, you can get a PhD in fine arts. That doesn't exist in the US, sadly, but it is an amazing opportunity here abroad. So in addition, he is one of the current faculty in the 6th painting studio at ASPA, and he has exhibited all over the world, done dozens of collective exhibitions in Poland and abroad. As you will see in a moment, he engages in dialogue with art theory, visual studies, and anthropology. And he engages in a lot of different discussion about historical, social contexts, and in recent years, he's been really sort of looking into the problems of violence within society and history in nature. So without further ado, I will pass the virtual floor to Michał. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Joanna, for all the words. Thank you so much for inviting me for this talk and for this opportunity to share some of my recent works with you. Please excuse me because I get nervous, during public presentations, especially in English. So please excuse all the mistakes I make during the presentation. I'll just start sharing my screen with my presentation. Just let me know if you can see it. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Does it change?
Oh, yeah. Yep. So we see the next slide. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Perfect.
So let's come back here. Okay. I'll try to. Okay.
One quick note. Michał, if you are willing, would you like people to ask questions or engage during your presentation,
Sure.
or should we hold them all towards the end?
No problem. No problem
Okay.
at all.
So feel free to type your questions or comments in the chat, or once again, raise your virtual hand. Michał may not be able to see that, so I will indicate if there is a question,
Okay.
but we'll also have a Q&A at the end.
Okay, because right now, when I'm sharing the screen, I cannot see you and I cannot see the chat. So,
all right, no problem.
So if there's any question, please let me know, and please tell me if I'm short on time.
All right, no problem.
Okay. So as Joanna mentioned, I'm an academic teacher at the Jan Matejka Academy of Fine Arts, and I'm also a visual artist. So I teach painting, mostly painting, or nominally I'm working at a painting studio, but together with my students, we just work on different media. So we don't exclude any sort of medium. We just try to teach art and talk about art, not about any specific medium. And let's say that my native language in art is painting. So I usually paint, but I also do some projects in photography. Sometimes I do video art. Sometimes I prepare like small installations or small objects. But I'll focus on painting like this time. In last years, I was mostly painting. So maybe that's why I'll focus on that. So I'll show you a couple of like some of my recent works from like last 2 or 3 years. As Joanna mentioned, I'm like my artistic activities are always based on a sort of like contextual background. So when I paint, when I photograph, I always refer to some sort of context, either a historical or sociological or theoretical context. So I try to have a sort of dialectical relationship between image and text. Sometimes I like I conduct projects that are like combining like sort of scientific research and artistic, practice. So it's sort of artistic research approach to visual arts, and I usually refer to this broad context of politics, sociology, sometimes art history. So I refer also to some strategies in fine arts from earlier eras, from the history of art. So as I also studied art history, I sometimes use this knowledge to like enhance like the projects, or to make this this contextual basis like richer, let's say. And in last years, I was investigating a problem, like a topic of nature, and the problem of visualizing nature in human culture. And this idea of landscape is quite important for me, because it's a sort of like a mixture of my interest in art history and also in like contemporary political and political situation, mainly referring to the problem of our extinction as a species on our planet. So landscape as an independent artistic genre emerged at the dawn of modernity, let's say, so early 16th century, as a testimony of the appropriation of Earth by our species, and Homo sapiens, by arbitrarily drawing a sort of line separating him from what he called nature, was supposed to symbolically exclude himself from its law and subject it to his merciless exploitation. So when 16th century landscape painters eliminated this human staffage, so these tiny figurines populating earlier paintings depicting nature, their native lands had already been irrevocably transformed by human activity. So that was the moment when there was no pure nature, no pristine idyllic nature, which was then only an artistic fantasy, a tangle of mythical longings desires, nostalgia for what had been lost. And by using historical conventions of depicting nature in the landscape tradition that is almost half a millennium old, I try to transfer this phantasm to the near future, when our species will have disappeared from the face of the planet. Yeah, so it's a sort of science fiction a little bit. I paint hypothetical landscape from a period after the end of humanity, when landscape will naturally not be allowed to exist, and when looking at nature could have a truly disinterested dimension. Yeah. So let's say that this is a kind of idyllic document from a period of a fulfilled utopia. And perhaps the fact that these paintings are not too different from the landscape painting strategies still known today will have a sort of soothing effect on us. So basically, I'm depicting nature by using strategies, earlier strategies from art history of depicting nature, of landscape tradition, from 16th, 17th or 19th century. So I use this language to sort of tell us, myself, about our near future. So I imagine our planet in the moment when we're not there anymore. Yeah, so the planet is empty from human beings, and what we see is pure nature. Yeah, this pure idea of nature, even though like this notion of nature is constructed only by us, by humans. Yeah, there's nothing like nature there. Yeah, it's sort of a creation of our species. So I'll briefly show you some of the paintings that I did in last 2 years. Sometimes they're just pure landscapes. Sometimes there are some like simple gestures, hands, fingers pointing to something that we don't know, appearing somewhere in the middle of this pristine nature. Yeah, sometimes there's this this simple gesture of a fist, which is quite ambiguous for me as a symbol, because it can mean like really many things. So it may be a symbol of resistance, a symbol of revolution, or a symbol of aggression. Yeah, so I try to play with those symbols and leave it like open for interpretations, and just to play with this, ambiguous side of this. So there's a sort of surreal effect. We have a landscape, and somewhere there appears a fragment of human body. Yeah, we never know why. What's whose hand is this? Where it is actually, it's never specified. So we have sort of landscape, and here you could see like something very important for me in last years. So idea of volcano, which always connects me with the idea of revolution, of something hidden underground beneath the surface, which is going to explode and then become solid again. Yeah, so as lava erupts, yeah, this eruption, fire, rapid change, revolutionary change, and then it solidifies. Yeah, it becomes rock again. So this melting rock becomes rock again, and it's a sort of, for me, it's a sort of symbol of permanent revolution. Yeah. So we have a couple of volcanoes here, and yeah, I didn't specify. When I paint, I usually use oil paints. So these are different formats, but usually oil on canvas or oil on wood, or on wood panels. For example, this one is on wood, this one is on canvas, this one is quite big. Yeah. Sometimes I depict nature as a sort of devoid of any human presence. You just see a sort of last remnants of human activity there. You have like a campfire in the middle of nowhere, but there's no one there. Yeah, there's no human being sitting around it. So it's just like the symbol of non-presence of us as a species. Yeah. So again, some of the images depicting fire, comets, you know, coming. Lightnings. So like those most simple elements that threaten us, but are like totally normal for the cycle of, you know, nature, all the cycles of nature. And here there's here you can see a sort of combination of those symbols. We have a volcano with a fist, and this fist was taken from an image, revolutionary image from early 20th century, which was depicting like the idea of socialist revolution. And the image was called The Hand That Will Rule the World. And here it appears in the middle of a volcano, in the middle of nowhere, on a planet, you know, not populated by Homo sapiens. Yeah. So as you can see, I play with those conventions of realist painting, realist landscape painting. Sometimes I refer to like exact paintings from art history. For example, here it's a sort of dialogue with Julian Fałat, a Polish landscape painter from late 19th century. And in this idyllic landscape of his, there appears sort of lava, yeah, which is like quite strange. We have a snowy winter landscape, and there's a sort of, you know, this substance, this dreadful substance that, you know, melts everything and changes everything, changes the landscape itself. So as you can see, I'm quite obsessed with volcanoes and fire recently. And here is there's like a different thread, also like combining like this idea of extinction of our species with landscape painting. And here I repainted some old paintings depicting the skulls of early hominids. For example, here's a Paranthropus boisei, like almost 2 million years old hominid. And he, like this skull appears somehow in a sort of, you know, landscape. Yeah. So as you can see, I try to use like those conventions of landscape painting, using like sometimes very how to say it, like this landscape form in a very kitschy sense. Yeah, so you have a lot of sunsets, lots of volcanoes, this sublime ideas that appeared in art history and landscape painting, you know, in 16th, 17th, 19th century. Okay, here are like some different paintings. This one showing a chimpanzee sitting alone. You know, you can see only his back, which also is a sort of figure of us, yeah, sitting there, you know, lost, afraid, yeah. In last weeks, I did some strange paintings on real stones. I collect stones and look for some shapes that appear there or may appear there. So I overpaint those simple stones, for example, by painting a lightning or you know, a fire, a flame. So I think I'm gonna develop this series, especially when we have the third wave of pandemic, so most of the shops are closed, so it's quite easy to find a rock or a stone and paint on it. Yeah. So 3 years ago, I also conducted a small series of paintings that consisted of texts, yeah, of short texts. I called it imperatives. So these were like imperatives that that make us rethink our ideas about art. You know, so usually these are imperatives to paint something that is really impossible to paint or impossible to depict in any way. So yeah, so you have like those simple paintings which are texts. So a couple of them here. And I also prepared for you some photographs of exhibitions. This is a sort of an exhibition in Berlin, in a very nice place, a very nice nice space called Horse and Pony Fine Arts, a very nice gallery with beautiful invasive space. It was a group exhibition that we did with Filip Rybkowski, who also works at our department at the academy. So here you can see some of my works in context. Here's the small sculpture. Another painting of a volcano with a strange black liquid coming up, you know, from you know, from the inside. And there are some photographs of an earlier exhibition, a very old exhibition actually. It was 2015, documenting artistic research that I conducted in Vienna. I was investigating like the origins of nationalism and actually Nazism in pre-war Vienna. So it was a artistic research project called Mensur that I did in 2015, and there are some images from the exhibition in Poznań. So you can see the paintings in context. Okay, so that was, I think, brief and extremely chaotic.
Not at all, not chaotic. No, this is amazing. Thank you, Michał.
I'm gonna stop sharing and I'm gonna just show you also like 2 of my books, because as I mentioned, I try to like work in cycles, in series, in projects. So I have 2 small art books that I published. One is here. It's called The Course of Line. It's a photographic project that I did 2 years ago. And another one is Mensur that I already mentioned. So it's a sort of art book that documents the project in Vienna. So it was it's a sort of, I think that I really like this format of art book, because it allows me to use both text and images and combine them, you know, in this sort of dialectical way. So it's sometimes that, you know, the image stimulates the text or the text stimulates the image. So I like to work in this way, and I like to just investigate some problems using like different languages. And sometimes it's painting, sometimes it's photography, sometimes it's it's an essay, and sometimes it's all of them connected in a form of book or in a form of exhibition. But yeah, recently there are no exhibition opportunities. We are in the third wave of COVID pandemic. So right now, most of the institutions are again closed. So I don't have any exhibitions coming. Yeah. So, but I think it's a common problem for all of us. Thank you very much for for
Yes,
for listening to this
so
chaotic presentation. And if you have any questions, please ask. Probably Joanna will moderate the discussion.
Yes, of course. So thank you so much for the amazing presentation. Dziękuję bardzo. Thank you again. This is really fascinating. And even though I know Michał personally, there's so much that I've learned even just through this presentation. So I would love to invite you all to ask Michał questions. I will start the discussion. I have so many questions, which we don't have time for all of them, sadly. But I first want to sort of revisit your discussion sort of towards the end of your presentation on your artistic research. And I'd like you to kind of expand upon that and tell us really what is your research process, I guess, with your projects. You have this art history background, you describe painting as your first love, and you're working in all these different media, but you did research on fascism, for instance, in Vienna. Can you talk us through how you investigate these topics in your research?
Okay, so yeah, maybe that's a good example of this project in Vienna. Yeah, so it was a scholarship for the project from Austrian Republic. It was a 6-month residency, let's say, in Vienna. So the project was, I was investigating like a very strange procedure or a very strange topic of academic fraternities, they're called. So this, in German, they're called Burschenschaften. So these were and are still are like very hermetic male-only groups of students, mostly students or young scholars, gathered, you know, in different universities in Austria and in Germany, and they were like those hermetic groups of intellectuals, which in 19th and early 20th century were extreme, sort of forgeries for it's not a good word, like places where intellectuals met and developed like the basic ideas of nationalism. Yeah, so these were like extremely nationalistic organizations that developed those ideas of first of national unity, and then developed into sort of fascist ideas in 1920s and 1930s. So I was investigating those groups, and especially a sort of ritual that they perform there, which is called mensur. And it's what it is. It's very strange, and probably most of you never heard about it, because it's called academic fencing. So they take those male groups meet in, you know, in their like clubs, and they fight with real swords. And the idea is to cut each other's face, yeah, to leave scars. They fight with, like, as I mentioned, like real swords. They cannot dodge the hits. They can just only use their swords just to stop, yeah, the sword from cutting you. And the main idea is just to, it's a sort of like an entry ritual for to these groups, to show how masculine you are and how enduring you are to pain. Yeah. So the main idea is to endure pain and to show your your inner strength. Yeah. And so I investigated it to just understand how those fascinations in pain and violence appeared in intellectual circles in Austria and in Germany, just to understand how people gathering in elite circles just develop those dangerous ideas of fascism and extreme nationalism. And it was sort of there's a question: how common were these fraternities? It didn't disappear.
Yes, how common were these
entry rituals
and entry rituals? Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they were quite common, and they were there were a couple of fraternities at every university in Germany and Austria. And right now, because the ritual itself is still there, yeah, and the fraternities, the Burschenschaften are still there. Right now in Vienna, there are 11 of Burschenschaften that are still performing this ritual, which is on the verge of being legal. But they always defend themselves that it's like extreme sport. So we all know that people can get harmed, but they do it on on their own consent. Yeah. So
that was a great question. We have another inquiry from Bogdan. Feel free to go ahead and unmute yourself.
I'm not sure how to raise my hand in Zoom, but just as an aside, I wanted to tell you that being that I'm old enough to have grown among people who were adults in World War I have to say that these types of rituals were all over the Austro-Hungarian Empire,
yeah.
including where my grandfather would have grown up, which is Czernowitz. And I'm sure it was the case in Krakow as well.
Well, yeah. Mm-hmm.
He took part in some of these, although he was a Pole. But maybe also at the time, I mean, I heard the stories in the 60s, and I still remember one of his friends who had no nose. He had like a prosthetic nose because it got cut off in one of these rituals. And my grandfather would be as anti-fascistic as they would get, except that at the time maybe there was no clear understanding where this leads. Like the gun in Act 1 of the piece. You don't know who is going to shoot in Act 3, I guess, right? But it had to be ubiquitous in the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
Of course, and but in Germany and in Austria in early 20th century, it was quite common that all of those Burschenschaften were extremely far right wing, yeah, so extremely chauvinistic and nationalistic, and really high amount of members of those Burschenschaften actually joined not only NSDAP but SS. And that's like the figures. I cannot remember right now the exact figures, but the percent of members of Burschenschaften in Germany becoming SS members was extremely high. So and probably when you encounter like photographs from like Nazi officials from the 30s and 40s, you can see the scars on their faces. And I always thought that these are like scars from the World War I, yeah, from the front. No, these were scars from mensua, so from this ritual. So yeah, that's but yeah, that's really true that it was also present in Krakow. It was also present in Poznan, which belonged to Germany back then, yeah, before World War I. So yeah, it was quite common. And yeah, but the main issue was that I was like investigating this sort of abstract idea of violence and aggression, male violence back then. And it was 2015, and I didn't know that actually this sort of topic will be so important for me as a Pole in 21st century, because it was the very moment that our there was election, and the government that was elected was a right-wing government and still is, and the politics in Poland and quite a lot of territories here in Central Europe are turning into far right. So when I started the project, I didn't know that it will be so contemporary, yeah, in political sense. So so that was quite strange, because it was a sort of artistic research project which was based on historical issues and developed into investigation into our contemporary society, yeah, and investigating of how violence is created also in those academic circles and academic elites.
Thank you all so much. I just want to highlight Bogdan real quick. He is also one of my amazing ASPA Fulbright's contacts. He's also been a godsend before and during the pandemic. So I just want to thank you so much for being here, and thank you for your question. For many non-native Poles or even non-Europeans, this is completely new information, or even as a native. So this is really, really valuable. So thank you. I also want to pass the floor. We had a question from Frank, so feel free to type or speak aloud your question.
Yeah, I actually had a pretty simple question. How would you either spell the word that you've been saying, or if you wanted to do more research on it, would you just look for like German academic circles or something like that? Because I'm not sure.
I'm gonna type in
Thank
chat.
you.
Oh, our polls are
Academic.
coming through. Thank you so much. We've got Oscar and Agnieszka. Dziękuję bardzo,
Burschenschaften is the
kochane.
name of the academic fraternities, and this ritual is called mensur. Mensur, because the distance between the opponents had to be strict. You could not change the distance between the opponents, so you had to stand still. You had to raise your sword and fight. Yeah, and you could not dodge. You just could use your weapon.
Yes, great question.
Crazy.
For those of us who are non-native Poles, sometimes the spelling, speaking from experience, is
That's German.
So thank you. But we have a question from Agnieszka as well.
Yes, hi, and thank you for the presentation. It was super interesting to listen to it. I was wondering, is there some kind of theory or like a research that you're building the concept, or like the thing that you present in your paintings, the human extinction?
Mm-hmm.
Is there any theory that supports that, or?
Actually, this cycle actually is not very like theory based. Yeah, it's just like a cycle. Like the main issue is just to rethink ourselves as a species, as a dangerous species for the planet, on the verge of extinction. Yeah, like I'm constantly thinking about this very specific moment that we're in. Yeah, so probably we're experiencing like this historical moment of disappearance. Yeah, of our own species. And I think it's really troubling us, many of us who think about it, especially. Yeah, but yeah, it may cause serious depression and fear. And what I'm doing for myself is just to soothe myself and to rethink that maybe it's not that bad, because the planet will be as beautiful as it is. Yeah, and it will not lose anything. A lot of species got extinct during last 4 billion years. Yeah, So it's a sort of rethinking our position, maybe distancing myself from, you know, this anthropocentrical position, you know. So just to use cultural tools to depict, you know, this moment when there's no culture at all, you know, as the culture, you know, gets extinct together with us.
Okay, super. Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
We have a great comment from Bogdan in the chat, so I invite you to just take a look at that, but I'll also read it aloud. For those of us who want to see a reenactment of the Minzor, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that properly, the ritual, there is a sequence in season 1, or Chartier, please correct me if that's wrong, series on Netflix. Also, if memory serves right, there are references to this ritual in one of the Martin Polak books, Death in the Bunker. So
yeah,
great
actually,
resource.
Thank you very much, Bogdan, because I also spoke to Martin Polak and we talked about this ritual. Actually, he sent me the photographs of his grandfather during the ritual. Yeah, the photographs taken in one of the Burschenschaft in Austria. So he also got scars, his grandfather. So he was kind enough to share with me these photographs. So yeah, I also, for all of you that are like interested in the topic, I recommend his books, especially this Death in the Bunker, which tells the story of his father involved in SS, you know, during the war.
Yes, thank you again. I have a couple more questions, but I also would love to invite anyone who has any additional questions to either speak aloud, raise your hand, or unmute yourself, or just type it in the chat. But I also would love to include in our conversation to point out the obvious, just in light of this past year of 2020, with the pandemic, so many really critical and crisis-oriented subsequent issues have arisen, both in the US and in Poland. We have issues related to human rights and social justice for different underrepresented communities. And your work really speaks to so many of those themes, whether it be related to politics, or even one of your works with the chimpanzee talks about loneliness, and sort of, I think we can all relate to some of those themes within the pandemic context. So that being said, I would love to kind of get your thoughts as an artist working during these times. How has this past year impacted your studio practice and impacted your work?
Okay, thanks for the question. Actually, that's quite strange that the first fist that I painted comes from the time before the Black protest. For those that don't know, we have like very serious like social conflict in Poland right now, because our government introduced like a very harsh law concerning abortion, and which caused like huge unrest in society, and thousands of people during pandemics actually marched in protests against this new restrictive law, and of course one of the symbols of the protest is of course a fist. Yeah. So actually I painted this first fist before it started, so it got updated with the political context, you know, in time, and afterwards I actually developed this idea of protest, of fighting against oppression, and so on and so on. But you know, answering this question in more like you know, simple way, I really don't have much time for painting, because I have 2 small kids, and when we are isolated, it's really difficult to find time to go into studio. So for me, it's just like painting at night, you know, when kids go to sleep, and I have, you know, and I have some rare opportunities to go to my studio, then I paint. So so all of the paintings that I showed you are most of them come from this period of of difficulties to find time, but I think it's very helpful just to engage in this process of painting. So it's quite important for me just to also to have a sort of distance towards, you know, this home situation that I'm, you know, closed in, as we all are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but of course, like another aspect is that, yeah, you can do all of these paintings, you can make all of those paintings, but there are no opportunities to show them. You know, so I'm very glad to show you them, because they have never been showed. Almost all of them were never showed on any exhibition because there was no opportunities for exhibiting recently.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that we're really hoping to really reintroduce, even in a virtual capacity with this project, is having some sort of opportunity to share our work, engage in conversation, and eventually virtually exhibit work at the end of this grant period, which will be in October. In addition, I know we're kind of getting towards the end here. I want to give us a quick couple minutes break. But before I do, I just would like to ask one more question. This project is really geared towards sort of providing emerging artists, you know, such as myself, quite frankly, the opportunity to, again, engage in our studio practice and, you know, connect with other artists. So what advice would you give for those of us who find ourselves in a uniquely difficult situation of just trying to kind of stabilize our studio practice and engage during this really difficult time when, as you said, opportunities are limited and everything is virtual?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a very difficult question, and we're dealing with it since the beginning of pandemic with our students. Yeah, and right now, because I think last March, when it started in Poland, like the situation was a mixture of fear, but also of excitement that, you know, there's something, you know, very strange happening, and maybe something new appearing, you know, on the horizon. Nobody knew what's gonna happen, how it's gonna end, and I remember those meetings with our students that were like, it was really like dense and exciting just to talk about the situation. And right now I get this impression that people are totally depressed and are totally fed up with the situation, fed up with studying, you know, on Zoom, studying painting on Zoom, yeah, which is, you know, quite awkward. And right now I'm in the middle of thinking that we're all in a crisis, and I don't have any simple answer to this question. I've got no idea how it's going to end, how long will it last. Right now, I think the best thing to do is to stay together, so stay connected, even, you know, virtually, to, you know, stay connected with people that also like do make art, yeah. Participate in all of the online exhibitions that you can, because yeah, it basically, that's all that makes sense right now. But yeah, I myself am totally tired with the situation, and yeah, probably most of us are tired with it, and we're gonna see. I think, like, for me as a teacher, it's also helpful to meet with students, especially, you know, with the youngest generation of artists, and it's always stimulating to listen to them and to see what they're doing, how they react. Yeah, so yeah, I'm lucky enough to see it and to experience it.
Thank you so much. Thank you once again for all the questions and comments too, and once again for your presentation, Michał.
Thank you
I wanna
very
give-
much, Joanna.
Thank you. I want to give everyone just a really quick break. It's really important to just like stretch our legs, grab a quick coffee. We'll be back in 2 minutes, so please don't go away. Have a quick break and we'll be right back. So we'll see you at 5 p.m. Poland time, 12 p.m. New York Eastern time. So see you in a moment.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
so much. Hello again, everyone. I'm just going to ease us back in. I know some of you all are probably still reconnecting, but we're going to go ahead and get started with our next presentation momentarily. Once again, if you're able to, we'd love to just see your faces as well. Kind of makes it a little bit more of a personal experience. But thank you all so much for sticking around. We have an amazing presentation coming up with my fellow Fulbrighter and friends and comrade during these crazy pandemic times in Krakow, the one other Fulbrighter from my cohort that has remained in Poland with me. It happens to be in Krakow, and I am forever grateful. We have Elizabeth Claire Rose next. I'm going to give us just a second. There she goes, waving for us. Once again, if you're just tuning in or if you're just reconnecting, we're going to have Elizabeth's presentation next, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce her. But I also want to say a really warm welcome to a couple of the Fulbright Commission members who happen to be on this call, who have also been a godsend and such an amazing support during this time. We have Paulina here. She's the US student researcher, point person, director extraordinaire. Justina, who is also the director of the commission. And I'm also, I think there might be someone else. I don't want to miss anyone, but thank you all so much for being here. It means so much that you're here with us, sharing this event. It's so great to see your faces, and hopefully we'll be reunited one of these days in person. Thank you so much. So we'll go ahead and get started with Elizabeth's presentation. Today, we will be talking with an extraordinary printmaker here, Elizabeth, as well as a photographer and overall amazing visual artist. Elizabeth earned her MFA in printmaking from Tyler School of Art and Architecture at Temple University in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in the US. Also holding a BA in Fine Art with a minor in Wilderness Studies from the University of Montana. And Elizabeth works with various patterns of species distribution, range maps, glacial movements as a way to chart and also reassess cross-cultural connections and our mutually shared landscape and world. Elizabeth has many different amazing exhibitions and residencies on her CV, including a publication in 25 Under 25, Up and Coming American Photographers in Volume 2, being published by Powerhouse Books and Center for Documentary Studies at Duke University, having been a resident also at various locations, including Mount St. Helens National Park Monument in Washington, USA. And she, as you will have heard, is a member of the Fulbright alumni, as a Fulbright alumna of the 2019-2020 cohort, and is currently still here in Krakow. So without further ado, I will pass the virtual floor over to Elizabeth.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. Okay. Does everyone see my presentation?
Yes, we see it.
Okay. All right. As Joanna mentioned, I'm Elizabeth Claire Rose. I'm a Fulbright alumna from the 2019-2020 year. And that was an interesting year. I'm originally from Springfield, Illinois, which is the capital of the state of Illinois in the United States. Also home to Chicago, where I think it's the second largest, maybe Polish city in the world. I'm not totally sure on that, but pretty close.
I think you're right. It's like right under like Warsaw, I think.
Yeah. So Illinois has a history of a shared relationship between Poland and the United States. And this is a map of Illinois and showing the protected natural areas of our state. And as you can see, there really aren't too many protected areas. It's quite small. There's a lot of very fragmented sections for habitat, and just in the southern part of the state, there is one national forest. And Illinois is often a state that is overlooked for its natural beauty. People mostly focus on the Western United States with these very dramatic landscapes. But as a person growing up there and the daughter of a biologist, I had an opportunity to discover a lot of the natural areas of my state, including this very interesting ecosystem related to the sand prairie, which is a result of glacial activity in the state, which deposited silt and left large tracts of sand deposits, which then were the formations of sand prairies. And so here you can see one of the major areas of the sand prairie. And spending time there as a kid, I was really interested in like harvesting prickly pear cactus fruits and things that maybe people don't typically associate with Illinois. And I started to become interested in documenting the specifics of the landscape through that experience growing up there. And as you can, on the left side here, you can see an etching I made depicting the sand prairie. It shows earth stars in the lower portion of the picture, as well as prickly pear cactus and faint renditions of snow geese, which were migrating across the sand prairies in February. My love for nature and my interest in art led me to study art at the University of Montana, where I earned, like Joanna said, a Bachelor of Fine Arts, but also a minor in wilderness studies. And I was very interested in studying the human relationship to landscape and place, and also how we as you know, society members contribute to the preservation and also degradation of our environment. And I studied printmaking there at the University of Montana, and just specifically focused on etching. mostly copper plate etching. And this is a picture of the whippoorwill, which is a bird found in the state of Illinois, also sitting on the blackjack oak, which is a tree that really prefers sandy soils. And here is the North American largest fruit called the pawpaw, which most people don't know about, but it is indigenous to the United States, mostly in the eastern and midwestern portion of the country. And I was very surprised and happy to see that the botanical gardens here in Krakow actually have a grove of these growing. So if you've never seen it, you should go there. Through the printmaking process, one of the things that has attracted me to working with it is the ability and flexibility of depicting different landscapes, even through the choice of ink and color application to the matrix. And so here on the left, you could see an image I made relating to the migrating snow geese in Montana, and also to the snow geese on the right. But the orientation and also the inking methods of the process of printing contributes to, the concept and, depiction of the work. So this is one of the things that I really appreciate about working with printmaking and working with the multiple. And some of the places that are really important to my work, I will just talk about kind of briefly. Some of them include different artist residencies I've been to, and different natural environments that have kind of helped develop my ideas. This is one location in Montana called the Absaroka Beartooth Wilderness. It's an area that has large Rocky Mountain peaks and plateau of land that's basically at an elevation of 10,000 feet. And so here's an image from this plateau. It's called the Lake Plateau. And once you climb up to the 10,000 foot elevation, you can basically traverse the landscape without really descending or ascending again. So you can just kind of walk at this high level of elevation, observing sort of a different ecosystem than you could down in the valleys. And so I've spent a lot of time traversing this type of environment, looking at different snowpack and snowfields, and thinking about like the different components of this type of landscape. And most notably for me is the glacial movements that are evident in alpine environments like this. And this kind of, here you have a glacial erratic. And what fascinates me about it all is just the way ice and climate have impacted the way the landscape is changed or carved over time. And especially with the glacial erratic, the deposits of different minerals and rocks from hundreds of miles away being basically thrown by the glacier into new locations. I think it's very interesting how the glacier, in a sense, draws into the landscape and carves, almost like a giant relief print. So from my experiences living in Montana and living in the Rocky Mountain West, I have created a lot of work inspired by glacial geology and boulder fields, and also thinking about the distribution of different species that are only present in those locations, like the American pika, which is known as a special indicator species of climate change. It's like a small animal that is related to a rabbit, but only lives in high alpine boulder fields. And with the onset of climate change, some of the habitat that has been formerly habitated is becoming harder and harder for the pikas to continue to live in. And so this is some work I made relating to that concept of the American pika and the boulder fields and how some of the snowpack that they depend on for year-round survival is disappearing. So in here we have, again, this is a picture of a plate in progress of a boulder field. But so some of the experiences I have from this environment have informed my interest in thinking about the way landscapes are connected to each other. And I also want to point out this location. It's in the Great Lakes region of the United States. It's called the Niagara Escarpment. And in the upper image, in the red, you can see basically an arc shape, which shows the Niagara Escarpment, which is an interesting location because it kind of provides the foundation for various flora and fauna, but also is sort of like a mirror. You could see in the lower section here, a section of Wisconsin and a section of Canada, but there's these little peninsulas that are forming these states, and they basically replicate each other because they're a part of the same habitat. And so over time, I visited a lot of these kind of locations, just thinking about different landscapes being connected to each other through geology, through ecology, through climate, through latitude, through elevation. And here you can see on one side is a picture of Lake Michigan, on the other side is Lake Huron. But they're very similar because they're part of the Great Lakes, but also because of their geological features and ecological features. So this kind of thinking has led me to continually think about our connected locations, like across the world, really. And on the left here, you could see an image of the boreal forest of Canada and also the taiga zone, which is in the paler green color. And then on the right, you can see an image of the global boreal forest biome. And so I've been increasingly interested as I started to visit different locations and wild areas to think about the way these places are connected through my artistic practice, but also just to think about the questions and the importance of visiting these places as an observer, as an artist, and as like basically an interpreter of my experience through my work. And I want to point out, so this in the far right section of the picture of the North American, you can see Newfoundland, which is a small, actually not so small, it's a large island off the coast, eastern coast of Canada. And I had the opportunity to spend some time as an artist resident there in Terra Nova National Park. And that was a very interesting experience for me. I was traveling by canoe and taking my copper plates with me to basically make drawings and etchings in situ. But it was a bit complicated, of course, because of mosquitoes. But also it was really an interesting experience because I really was able to see a lot of similarities to places that I had been familiar with in terms of living in the Rocky Mountain West and also in the Great Lakes regions. And so I made a lot of photographs from that experience and also started to think about bogs and bog habitats, and became interested in this one plant, particularly called the pitcher plant, which is like, it's a carnivorous plant that you can find in a lot of places in the world, but specifically there's one called the purple pitcher plant, which is found in a lot of regions in North America in bogs. And so I started to make work about this specific plant and the importance of it in relation to several of the sites that I had visited. And so some of this work is from that experience spending time in Newfoundland. and thinking about the layers of geology, the layers of connectivity across the different latitudinal parallels in North America, but also, again, it started to lead me towards being interested to visit more locations in a similar latitude. And so I ended up pursuing an artist residency with this group called Signal Fire, which is an arts organization based out of Portland, Oregon. And they specialize in taking artists to remote locations to live in the forest, basically, for a week or two. And it provides artists an opportunity to really experience a place without working, like some of the basic necessities, like having food, are taken care of for you. So you're not really stressed too much about that. So I did an artist residency with Signal Fire on Mount St. Helens National Monument, which erupted in 1980. And this is me in my tent studio space. And again, I was packing copper plates with me and a tripod and working in the forest at nighttime to make photographs, but also collecting ideas for future works on paper. And so this was kind of the environment I was living in just for 1 week, but it was a very impressive experience because living in a place that has been completely destroyed by such a great force as a volcanic eruption really does impact your outlook on maybe your own humanity, and also like how amazing it is that things are able to rejuvenate around you. And so from that experience, I made an artist book with different photographs that I had created during that time. And so I self-published a book using a risograph machine, which I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's basically like a fancy copy machine, but also has the ability to print like an offset printing process. So it's kind of between maybe silkscreen and lithography and a Xerox. So that's interesting. But while I was there, I was thinking also about the connections between, the different volcanoes in the United States, but also around the world in the Ring of Fire, and just thinking about all the sort of volatile landscapes that could change just at a moment's notice with these eruptions that could happen. And of course, like Mount St. Helens isn't going to probably erupt for another 150 years, but you never know. So, and so the time that I spent there, I really was thinking about the way landscape can change, whether that be from a natural phenomenon like a volcano, or it could be, related to human impact. And so I was really starting to think a lot more about, just the vulnerability we have in different places that can, change and shift over time, but also our own responsibility and our own impact in places. And so from that experience, I made work with the copper plate etching and relief prints to depict the experience, which is ash plume, which is a monoprint, like I said. But I also started to think about the way land can disappear. And so here's a set of mesotints I made using spitbite, which is a technical term for just using different acids on the copper. And so during that time, I was thinking again about how a place can shift over time, can shift with the climate change, like the heat, where, the heat can melt different icebergs, or, a volcano can literally blow the top of a mountain off. So just thinking a lot about the alteration of landscape, whether that be human caused or naturally occurring. And also some important elements to my work relate a lot to Alexander von Humboldt and his explorations throughout the Americas and the way he was able to chart different zones in mountain structures. So thinking about the way you can literally climb from the base of a mountain to the top of a mountain peak and explore several different habitats based on elevation and of course, temperature. So in reference to his work, I was thinking a lot about the way altitudes are more susceptible to climate change, but also to the way that they can host different species. Like I said, the American pika earlier is important, excuse me. The American pika, only can live in certain high altitudes. So it's thinking a lot about the way these different altitudes are important to protect, and also how interesting they all are because they can depict a whole selection of different kinds of flora and fauna. So here's some more work relating to the different layers and different composites of landscape. And along the similar line of thinking is, here's a series of prints I made using mezzotint, relief, and intaglio processes. And they're meant to depict 6 different locations at different times of year, but basically along the same latitudinal parallel. So the piece is called latitudinal because of the lines that cross, our globe, but the idea is to connect different locations based on the shared latitudinal parallel. So, and this is some more work from the piece I described earlier about the different places that shift over time. And this one is relating to like rising sea levels, thinking about like warming and how that affects the melting of ice, which in turn affects, the amount of water that may or may not be present in a particular location. And here's a detailed shot of one of the intaglio prints I made on Kozo. And here's a map of all the different eco-regions of the world. And you can see how Poland has a lot of this sort of green blue colors, which is similar to places in the Eastern United States. And so part of one of the main reasons I wanted to come to Poland was to investigate ways that Poland's landscape is similar and different to that of the United States, because Poland has the last European bison. And as you know, we have the American bison, and just thinking about ways that our landscapes are shared and connected, but also different. And so I've been able to, during this pandemic, even though, things aren't the way I originally thought, I still have been able to go visit a lot of the locations that I'm interested to create more work from later. But you could see here just the way the different zones are in the world. And here's an altitude map of Poland. And so that's the end of my talk.
Oh, thank you so much. This was so fascinating. And I think I'll ask you to keep the Poland one up for just a moment, if you don't mind. But first, thank you so much for the great presentation. It's so great to just kind of re-engage in these more formal talks, because Elizabeth and I have a chance to chat pretty frequently, but it's such a great experience to dive into the work again and to hear more about your process and the context leading up to that. I asked you to hold this one because I would love, as my first question, for you to talk about the various places you've been to in Poland during your Fulbright and following during the pandemic, including discussing briefly your bike trip over the summer. She was able to go all over Poland, so I'd love for you to share a little bit about that too.
Yeah, so I really was interested in Krakow, especially because of its location to the Tatras and the Carpathians. But during the pandemic, I have been able to visit the Beskids a lot. And before the pandemic, I did get to, go to Bieszczady a couple of times. And a lot of my work starts with field research, like visiting different sites, making photographs, collecting ideas, looking at different research about the different environments I'm interested in visiting. So a lot of the places I visited mostly have been in southern Poland, and then also in the Bieszczady area, and a little bit in the Tatras. But I also really wanted to go to Białowieża, which I think is over here. Anyway, I did during this experience managed to go on the green velo bicycle route, which I started in Rzeszów and biked all the way up along the border with Ukraine and Belarus, all the way to Białowieża. And then I continued and biked along this Lithuanian and that Kaliningrad Oblast, all the way to Gdansk. And so that experience allowed me to make a lot of photographs, which I'm looking forward to printing and exhibiting at some point. And also just a lot of the experience of traveling in Poland and visiting all the different types of places I know will really impact me in the future as far as when I get back into a professional printmaking studio. I really am excited for that opportunity to make new work based on my experience here. But yes, so I mostly have been visiting Eastern Poland and Southern Poland, not so much Northwestern or the Western side.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to hold up the map because I think many people on the call maybe are not as familiar with the geography in Poland and the parallels and differences between, for instance, different parts in the US or different parts of the world. At this point, if you have any questions, feel free to produce them now, but I also have questions to introduce as well. But anybody, feel free to unmute yourselves or type anything in the chat as well.
Yes, I also wanted to show the risograph book that I made from Leeuwit, which is Mount St. Helens. And these are kind of the examples of, I mean, they're small, they're photo books, but they're printed in these, the CMYK way, and you can make duotones or tritones, which I'm looking forward to making some more of this relating to Poland. So anyway.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I also, for those who are not as familiar with printmaking or the processes of printmaking, I would love for you to kind of describe a little bit more about your personal research process, as well as just the process of actually making some of the works that you were so kind to show us, whether that's lithography, monoprints, and so forth.
Yeah, well, I mostly work with copper to make etchings, which involves taking a piece of copper and coating it with a hard ground, which is kind of made out of asphaltum or wax. And then I use special tools like needles to draw my designs into the hard ground. And then I put the whole plate into ferric chloride, which is a salt-based acid. But you can also use zinc and nitric acid to do the same process. And also I use, let's see, I have a mezzotint rocker, which has lots of little teeth on it.
Oh my God.
And you basically rock the plate using the motion of just basically rocking this whole thing across the plate, which creates tiny little burrs, which then I use a burnisher to draw out highlights into the plate. So it's a little complicated and not having access to a printing press, but I have come up with other strategies. I have this This is a Czech-made Baron, which you can basically go across the surface of the plate and produce prints from like wood. So I've been carving some plywood while I've been here, and just trying to do some hand printing with this, which I've had some success. It's not the same maybe as a printing press, but so those are some of the things. But I also use lithography, which is using a big stone, which I'm not doing right now. So
Yeah, I think limestone might be a bit hard to do at home, but
yeah,
you know, there's that. But I'd love for you also just to describe a little bit more about you tap into so many different levels of biological sort of research, of botany, of landscapes, some more technical elements of even just thinking about different altitudes, climate change. Can you tell us a little bit more about what led you to these interests, or what sort of inspires you to investigate these different topics and these different subjects?
I guess, as I mentioned, I grew up basically always looking at the environment. I was raised by a biologist, so I was always on field trips when I was a kid, whether that be looking for chorus frogs or bats or random endangered snakes. I was in the field with my dad doing this kind of things. And that definitely informed the way I think about places. So just out of habit and maybe out of instinct, I'm often interested to find out about like what is special about the Polish landscape, or what is the most rare plant of, you know, the Carpathians, or some of the questions that I start to think about, I think are related to that upbringing, also my personal training with the wilderness studies. And I think also visiting places over many years has also increased my interest in a place. Like, you know, maybe you go to a place, you know, when you're 10 years old, and then you go back when you're 20, and you think about the ways that place has changed. And so I've been interested in how places change based on, like I said, the human caused impacts, but also just natural phenomena like the eruption of Mount St. Helens, or that kind of thing. So that's basically the forefront of how I get my ideas, is just spending time in a location and seeing how that location affects my view of my interest.
Absolutely, thank you. And again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to just go ahead and ask or type them out. Similar to me, how I have so many questions that we obviously don't have time for, but feel free to ask any, you know, in the next couple of minutes. I also would love for you to talk a little bit more about your experience, even just within Central and Eastern Europe in general. Elizabeth's been to many other neighboring countries to Poland, including Ukraine, the Czech Republic. She even has sort of lineage in Slovakia. So maybe you can talk a little bit about sort of comparing your research and artistic experience in these various countries, and what has been the most interesting to you, what's been a big takeaway during your time here in Poland as well.
Well, one thing that during this pandemic, I've been thinking a lot about access, like at the beginning of the pandemic when the parks were closed, and you know, basically the places that were maybe most relaxing for me personally were closed. I was just thinking about like how dependent people are not, you know, on different abilities, like going to the forest or walking down the street. And so that I started to think more and more about the access, like how the tape, you know, was up and you couldn't access certain places, but also, you know, and all these borders we have, right? Like you can't just cross the border super casually. It's like a decision that you can't, right? And one thing I think is also interesting is how there's all these different national parks that are shared between countries in a way. Like Poland has a section, like a large section of the park Białowieża, but then Belarus also has a section, and you can't like just casually visit the Belarus side. But there's also the area in Bieszczady, and there's a shared across the border in Ukraine. They have a protected area kind of in a similar habitat. And also in Slovakia, they have a national park. And just thinking about like the collective efforts from different countries to preserve a place, I think has been really interesting for me being here, just thinking about like the decision to protect something and how it's like a shared effort among different cultures. And that has really been something I've been thinking about and working with during this time. And yeah, I would say, and also thinking a lot about the built environment and how that has, you know, informed what we have access to. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Oh, I'm muted. Yes, absolutely. Something that I've been really thinking about a lot is the idea of mobility and, as you said, access, and how that's drastically shifted during the pandemic. And that's, you know, for valid and legitimate reasons, but it also has really, it does shift our understanding and perspective of just boundaries and what do we have the privilege to access and what do we don't, and what does that look like, especially with citizenship. You know, as an American citizen, we have exceptional access generally, and it's a novelty that US citizens can't travel right now, and people, you know, are having difficulty reconciling that. You know, not even being able to sort of move about freely as a tourist internationally, or quite frankly, even nationally or locally. So I know we're kind of at the end of our time here, but I do want to open it up if anyone does have any final questions or comments for both Elizabeth and Michał. We have a thumbs up, so thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and close the meeting, but I just want to thank you all so much for being here, spending some time on your Saturday to join us and to engage in this conversation. I want to continue to have these with artists from both Poland and the US. So stay tuned. You'll be hearing more in the coming weeks and months. And we're just so grateful to have you here. And thank you so much to Michał and Elizabeth for putting together these amazing presentations and for taking the time to chat with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And
Thanks, Jess.
thank you. And see
Thank
the emails and the announcements for more info on Michał and Elizabeth. If people want to learn more about you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I guess you could visit my Instagram. Oops, I didn't even write it right.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, so you can shoot something in the chat. Also in the emails and the Facebook event on Instagram, we have all of Michał and Elizabeth's info for you. So you can check their pages, websites, any additional information, you can contact them there if you have any additional thoughts or would like to follow up with them after this event. So thank you all once again. We will keep you posted on future events, but have a great rest of your evening or afternoon, morning, whatever time it is for you. Dziękuję bardzo, kochani, and have a great day. Do zobaczenia. Dzięki wielkie. Thank you so much.
Dziękujemy.
Thank you.
Do zobaczenia. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Dzięki
Bye-bye.
wielkie. Participants, you know to stay on, so just stay on for a
Mhm.
couple more minutes. Thank you so much.
Bye.
All right, Papa, thank you so much.